Greetings and top of the morning to you, or evening, whichever the case may be. Welcome to our show, Ghosts R N.E.A.R, where we discuss various aspects of the paranormal and paranormal exploration. I am your host, Keith Johnson, the founder of New England Anomalies Research. With me is my co-host and co-founder, Sandra Johnson.
Hello there.
And happy St. Paddy's Day to all. And we have some very, very special guests with us tonight. Very, very dear friends, old friends that we've done a lot of investigating. I just love these guys. We have so much history together that we can talk about. It would take hours to tell it all, but I would like very much, it is my privilege, to introduce our dear friends, David Manch and Mike Dion.
Thank you.
It's great to see you guys again.
It's nice to be back.
It's been a long
Nice
time.
to have you here. Welcome, studio audience. Good to see you all out there.
Hi, guys.
Well, so good to have you here, guys. It just warms the heart to have you here. I mean, we go back so far. We've had so many investigations, so many adventures, and some are just totally unknown, and some I've written about, but you know, it's just so many fond memories.
Some were kind of wacky too, but those are the good ones.
Those were the good ones. Really, those were the good ones. And of course, both of these gentlemen have experience in law enforcement too.
Right. I was a police officer for about 7 years in Vermont, so gave me some investigative background experience, and I'm glad to say I'm no longer doing it because it's kind of a crazy world out there. It's a lot safer not doing it.
Right, exactly. And Mike?
And I'm currently an officer with the American International College Campus Police.
Right.
In the thick of it still.
In the thick of it, right.
It's a lot of fun, actually.
Well, recently, Dave, of course, no stranger to paranormal investigation, has been doing another form of investigation, and that is going to abandoned houses, asylums, mansions, as the phantom photographer. And I'll give you a little introduction, Dave, in your own words. And of course, Mike joins you on many of these sojourns. So, David, to quote your explanation of your career as the phantom photographer, in an attempt to preserve through photography the historic locations throughout New England that have fallen into disrepair and ruin, I travel with like-minded friends to abandoned asylums, hospitals, state schools, factories, and resorts. And of course, your motto is, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints.
Exactly. It's important to really document some of these locations that are not in use anymore because they're not going to be with us forever. And a lot of them are architecturally very significant as well as historically significant. And the reason why some of them were built with such care and ornate trim was that they were thought to have a therapeutic value to the people who were housed in these buildings. So before they're gone, we want to make sure that we capture these images and preserve it for history.
That is wonderful. And to have the awareness of these old buildings that so many have gone without record. I mean, I wish you had been around when I was first starting my investigating career. Some of the old buildings that we went in, and of course, sometimes we shouldn't have been in those buildings. They were a little unsafe.
I can think of a few of those.
Oh yes,
There's a lot of them out there, so.
Yes, but to preserve them and have the respect for the beauty of these buildings, which all of us who do investigating are aware of.
Some of them were designed by world-famous architects, so they're very aesthetically pleasing to look at. And as far as photography goes, the art of photography is really to have a picture tell a story. So I can put a caption and explain what the picture is, but it's better to have the picture do that for you. So if you take the picture effectively, it'll tell the viewer exactly what's going on. And some of these photos are absolutely breathtaking because they're scenes that the typical person isn't going to see. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, unless you go into a lot of abandoned buildings, you're not going to see them. So.
Right, exactly. And there's just so many times that, you know, danger's just lurking around the corner and you're not even aware of it. I remember We were going out to one of our favorite restaurants after one of our classes we used to do in the Boston Adult Education paranormal classes, and it's it's night, it's Boston traffic. Go around the corner, all of a sudden there's a car coming. Mike grabs it, pulls it, and rains in. Well, you never know what's coming out of the blue or out of the darkness, so to speak.
Right.
I just hope that wasn't me driving it. But
I don't think it was. I think you're a safer driver than that.
I hope so.
Appreciate that, Mike. I don't remember that particular incident, but that's good.
I think
Good
you
of
were talking at the time.
Oh, was I?
No problem.
But we do have quite a history with you guys. Is this your third appearance on our show now, Dave?
This is my fourth appearance.
Your
It's the
fourth.
first one that's not in December. So
Yes, right.
Oh,
It's
okay.
not any warmer, but it's still winter time. But
Right. Well, here in New England, right?
True enough.
You get bored, just wait a minute.
Right.
Okay, so number 4 for you, and I think this is our first time that
First
we've
time.
actually been able to get you on the show, Mike. We've been trying for years now.
It just, everything
You're an
kind of
elusive
came together.
character.
Everything just came together. It worked out great. Dave told me you guys would like to have me here, and I had the day off.
Absolutely.
So it was my pleasure to come down. And of course, I haven't seen you guys. I was thinking about it. It's been, I believe, 8 years since I've seen you guys.
Wow.
So
Has it
it's
been
been a
that
long
long?
time. Yeah.
It doesn't seem it, but time goes by so
Yeah.
fast. Just cherish every moment, you know?
Absolutely.
And so many of our viewers don't realize that we used to investigate, like you were saying before we went on the air, that we used to be investigating almost every week
Yeah.
for a while
Oh,
there.
Yeah. I remember doing investigations on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
I mean, all 3 days of the weekend, and it was just it was a regular thing to see you guys. So it was
Yeah.
so to be able to come back after all these years and finally get to say hi, because I've been telling you via Facebook and whatnot that I miss you guys, I want to see you. So thank you for the opportunity to be able to do that.
Thank you for being here very much.
And he could still do it. He's got plenty of time. Don't let him fool you.
All right. Well, one of the things that one of the stories that I always used to like that you used to tell when we would teach with you, Mike, in Boston was your story about how you saw an anomaly while you were driving. It was an extremely fascinating story. And if you could just tell our viewers.
That was strange because I had received a phone call from my mother saying that my uncle, he had a stroke and she needed my help. So I just immediately jumped in the car and was driving away. And I turned to wave at the window to the house and didn't see anybody. And as I turned back to the road, I saw out of the corner of my eye my son in his bedroom window, and he was waving. So I turned back and I waved to him. And when I turned back and looked at the road, I slammed on the brakes because I thought I was going to run into something, because in the middle of the road, there was this thing. I don't even know how to explain it other than what I saw. It was just that it looked like a ball about the size of a softball that had like lit up glitter inside of it, and from that, this like in the movie Poltergeist, where that ropey thing was coming down the stairs, that was just arms like that going all over the road, and it was just so prominent. I slammed on the brakes. I thought I was going to hit it. I didn't know what it was at the time. I just slammed on the brakes, and as I realized it wasn't a person or anything in the road or an animal, I just slowly coasted through it, and I'm thinking, what was that? I have no clue. And I don't know why. I never looked in the rearview mirror, drove, went to my mom's house. I got out of the car, and I was running up. I looked over in front of the car, expecting to see something on the front of the car. There was nothing there. So after everything was said and done, I was going back home. I drove by where I had seen this thing, and in the road where it was, now it hadn't been raining or anything. Oh, and by the way, it was just getting to be dusk, so it was just starting to get dark. So when I drove up to where I had seen this thing, in the road, probably about maybe a 2 foot wide, 3 foot wide section on the road, it was wet. Just that one spot. So I have no clue what this thing was. But it was definitely weird, and enough to where I had to slam the brakes on, thinking I was going to run into something. And there was nothing there. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there was something there, but I mean, as I drove through it, there was
there.
It just
something.
kind of disappeared as I went through it. So it was pretty weird.
Yeah, paranormal, outside of the norm. We don't know what it was, but it was something.
Some kind of anomaly.
Yeah. Well, that's one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite paranormal stories.
And then there was the one about my son that happened, in basically the same area.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When I believe I told you about the story, right?
Yes.
And he went out to walk the dog, and he went down, made a right out of the driveway, made another right onto the other street, and then was walking parallel, made another right, he was walking parallel to the street that I lived on. And he said he was walking, and all of a sudden he heard tires screeching, and he turned around, and there was like two kids had gotten hit by a car, and he ran over to see if they were okay, and they disappeared. And he said he just turned around and said, okay, and he just kept walking the dog. And as he was walking, it kept happening over and over again, and they were calling his names. They knew his name. And then he said that it happened so many times that one time he turned around and looked, and he decided to look around and realized that there were fewer houses on the street, almost like he was looking into the past. I can't explain that one either, but that was a pretty strange thing for my
Some kind
son.
of time displacement.
Yeah, I don't know. But the funny thing is, I believe it was about a 2-week period between those two incidents, and nothing before, nothing after.
I believe it was meant that you experienced these things, just time just right.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it.
No, we can't explain it, but somehow it was meant to be perceived by you and your son.
One thing the two of you are very good at explaining are the technological aspects of paranormal investigation. Keith and I have learned so much working beside you and teaching beside you in the classes that we used to do in Boston. I just wanted to get that out there. If anything that you all want to know along the technological aspects of equipment and so forth, these are the go-to guys, these two.
And if you want to know anything that happened in the last 500 years about anything, talk to Dave, because he's got detail after detail after detail about everything.
It's not first-hand experience. It's just having read it somewhere. But yes.
World according to Dave.
No, but he's very knowledgeable about a lot of things regarding history and whatnot. So,
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technological aspects, I mean, we're grasping with very little amount of information to work with. Nobody knows how to research this stuff, so we're using what we have available to us, and if you don't take advantage and avail yourself of that and learn as much as you can how to use these things, it really doesn't make sense to try to use it because you don't know what you're looking at. So we've had the opportunity to experiment with a bunch of different things and a bunch of different locations of just about every type you can imagine, and we're no closer to the answer, but you know what? I mean, we're better off for trying anyway, I think.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, I just wanted to get that out there because I've learned so much. Having you on the show and the folks that have come with you and demonstrated different paranormal equipment, I've learned a lot, and I wanted to, make sure our audience. Just wanted to remind you.
Yeah, those classes were a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were a lot of fun.
We missed that, and then going out afterward to the Hard Rock Cafe.
Yeah, out in the freezing cold, the streets of Boston. Yeah.
Getting almost hit by a car.
Typical Boston weather.
Yes.
Yeah.
So getting back to your experiences around abandoned buildings and the locations where you do your photography, have there been anything that you could not explain, anything that has happened to you while you've been taking your photographs? I
did have one thing happen in a rather large state hospital. In fact, this was one of the largest not even in New England, but they housed at one time about 7,500 patients there. It's been closed since the late 1970s. And while we were inside, I was talking to another photographer who was in there with me and saw something on the wall behind him. And it moved from one end of the wall to the other. It was pretty clearly something was there. It was more than just a shadow because it moved with intent and purpose, and it stopped and then went through the wall. So I saw it. I was talking to him. I didn't stop because when I'm in these places doing the photography, I try to stay focused on the photography and not get overwhelmed with trying to figure out everything else that's going on in there. There could be very strong emotions in these locations. There were some barbaric things that happened there. This was a part of our history that was intended to be something helpful to people with mental and physical disabilities. Unfortunately, overcrowding these locations and understaffing them, as well as grossly underfunding them, it took the promise that they had away. and turned them into places that were probably more of a nightmare to the people who were there than of a benefit. Although that can't be said for every single one of them. There were some of these locations that were actually very beneficial to the people who were residents there, but some of them not so much. And some of them, they used some very barbaric methodology for trying to treat people from prefrontal lobotomies, malaria injections, to try to, with the theory that giving someone one illness would get rid of the other one.
I've heard of that.
Hydrotherapy, electroshock therapy, so many, and even insulin-induced comas. So there are a lot of these things were very experimental in nature, and didn't work usually. So I mean, they may have had some benefit, but for the most part, they're more harmful than not. So the energies that you can experience in these places, if you're going in there and you're allowing that to consume you, it would probably take up everything that you were in there to do and do away with that. We're going in there to document this from a historical standpoint by trying to capture the images before these places are gone forever. And some of them are very powerful images. And I'm hoping I can share some of those with you today.
Yeah, well, let's look at some of these
Sure.
images.
We have one that is actually of in a large state hospital. There were some patient possessions that were left behind, and this one, there's a pair of eyeglasses that were left next to a drinking glass on the windowsill. It just kind of it provided a very powerful image in itself.
Yes, it kind of humanizes it.
Exactly, Keith, and that's a great word, is to humanize this experience. And this is what we're going in there to do when we take these photos, is to really make sure people understand that these were people that lived lives like everyone else. Maybe their lives were different because of their disability, but they were still people.
Right.
And a lot of them spent their entire lives in these institutions.
Now, do you find that this is the case with a lot of the locations that you investigate or photograph, that things are sort of just left like they're going to return in a few minutes, you know?
Unfortunately, that is a good way to put it. It's almost like a piece of their life has been left behind. And when you find instances like this, it's more it's sobering to see that and understand that, you know, this belonged to someone, and it was an important part of their life at one point. What happened to them, we have no way of knowing.
A lot of the locations, it just looks like somebody dropped everything, ran out the door, and it just stayed that way for years and years and years.
Frozen in time.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. This next picture is of a boys' reform school where everything does appear to be frozen in time, except for the fact that time is continuing to evolve around it. It's just kind of an image that I think it explains itself pretty well, I think.
Wow. It's dismal and yet so captivating.
Dismal is a good word. A lot of these places are very dismal. It's amazing that they've stood up for the amount of time that they're still there, and the fact that they've left some relic of the past behind for us to still see before it's gone forever.
What about gaining access to these locations?
A lot of them we have permission to go into. Some of them, if the door is open, we go in. It's not to necessarily say that you should. They're not always very safe to go into these locations, but you know, we're certainly not looking to go out and do something illegal, but we would like to get pictures in some of these places before they're gone. So if we can get permission to go in, that's our main prerogative.
Well said.
And the next one is a hallway at an abandoned state hospital. And you can see that it's in a poor state of repair, but each of those rooms has a small window where the staff could look in and just, you know, check on the welfare of the people who were residing inside of there. So these rooms were tiny. They were very small, 6 feet by maybe 10 feet. They were just more of a cell than a room. And people in some of these locations spent a significant portion of their life, if not all of it, there. So it's a sad testament to see that and to understand that we tried to isolate people, to treat them and give them constant supervision, and that wasn't necessarily the best way to do this. And one of the reasons why institutionalization itself failed was that we really tried to understand something that maybe we didn't quite have a good enough grip on what we were looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there are problems with deinstitutionalization as well. I mean, with the homelessness problem and so
Unfortunately.
forth. I mean, I'm not for this in any way, shape, or form, but I mean, there are
Right.
problems either way you go.
We kind of reverted back to the system before these larger institutions were built by, the treatment of people using anti-psychotropic drugs like Thorazine, where they were able to more monitor their own life without constant supervision. But unfortunately, a lot of them ended up in jail or homeless.
Yes.
So we really didn't solve the problem by deinstitutionalization.
No.
We just did that because there wasn't adequate funding to do it. And when the government took it over, enough said. I mean, that probably speaks volumes in itself.
Exactly.
Right.
This picture that we're looking at now is a kind of a solitary photo. This is typically what you see when you go into some of these locations is an empty chair, an empty bed, just something that is a representation of a lost life or someone that needed this at one point and now it's
Just
sitting there
discarded,
vacant.
abandoned, and the composition, it just says it all. You know, you're standing there and you're looking at it as the viewer, and it does convey the feeling.
And that's the feeling we're trying to convey, Keith, exactly, is, again, having the photograph tell a story. It's not for the sake of just artwork. It's more for a storytelling purpose and to preserve this so that people will see this long after these places are gone.
Yes.
Dave does a great job of capturing the past and the present, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one secret I need to figure out, though, is how come there's more dust in my house than in these places? I gotta figure that one out. I don't know.
I don't know, maybe you need to hire a maid service. And trust me, there isn't more dust in your house than these places are very, very hazardous. Dust,
I think like
asbestos and lead
everything.
paint.
Yeah,
So,
right.
not to mention the fact the ceiling may fall on you at any time,
Right.
or the floor.
Yeah.
But they're still interesting to see. This is another a hallway in a large state hospital where patients were housed in these very tiny rooms that were more like jail cells. It's very sobering to see this when you walk in and know that there was probably 100 people for every staff member that was in this facility at one point. Inadequate care, inadequate funding to keep it open and provide the correct type of treatment that these people deserved, and they truly did. And unfortunately, a society turned their back on them by isolating them in these locations and then not funding them properly. This photo, I included this so that you could just see, this is a dentist's office in an abandoned developmental center where people with physical disabilities were treated. And it's just the image, I think, that it provides that I'm not sure if it says the same thing to everybody that sees it that I saw when I took this picture, but it's almost a symbol of the barbaric conditions that were in these places. I'm sure it looked quite different when it was in operation, but it may have looked like this to the people who were patients there.
Right.
Their viewpoint may be what we see now. It may have been
Exactly.
a living nightmare for them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love this one. This is a great shot.
I know.
I'm gonna get a tattoo of that.
You do that. I won't. This is a form of treatment that
Hydrotherapy?
Hydrotherapy that I truly don't really understand exactly what they were thinking. It was providing constant flowing water that was heated between 95 and 99 degrees
Wow.
and keeping the person in these tubs with a canvas cover over it for anywhere from several hours to even several days.
Oh, my goodness.
So the tops of these were designed so that they could be fed while they were inside of it. They were really restrained. It was one way for some of these institutions to put the number of restraints that they used down. They didn't have to, because they had to account for the number of restraints that they had. These were technically not restraints. However, when the patient was inside, they most certainly were unable to move or to get out on their own. So
Right.
these are something that you don't commonly see, and they're quite a sight when you do look at it from your, even just the picture is pretty frightening to see it. But when you walk in there and view it, it's very awakening to see that and know that this was a treatment for the mentally ill.
Wow.
It's shocking to look at.
It is. And I don't think it was any more shocking when it was clean and it was in use. Or less shocking, I should say, when it was in use.
Right.
And the reality hits you what they were going through.
Well, exactly. And fortunately, this type of therapy was stopped about 50 years ago. And for good reason. It didn't do anything. It didn't work. Changing the sensations people were experiencing by the temperature, it didn't do anything. These are two side-by-side rooms in a state hospital. And it gives you a scope of the size of the rooms. They were tiny. Some were even smaller in different facilities, but these were unique, and the coloration I thought was interesting, so it would make an interesting representation for exactly the scope of the size of these rooms where people spent their entire lives.
Dreary comes to mind.
Dreary is right.
It is dreary. I don't think you can brighten it up with the paint.
No, just too small. I mean, there is a window in it, but
that's about it. It's not a very cheerful place to be. It's even less cheerful when you walk in there now and look at the condition that it's in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the last one. So, interesting stuff. Again, it gives you an idea of what this place was like and exactly the conditions that were there, knowing some of the things that happened that shut these places down and some of the reasons why they decided to go a different route, and rather than warehousing people and leaving them off the street, there was better treating them in small community-based centers.
Right, exactly. And I see you did bring something with you.
I did, and this is something I thought you might enjoy. This is a gift to you and Sandra. It is a photograph of Seaside Sanitarium, which is a state park in Waterford, Connecticut.
isn't that wonderful?
Oh, thank you so much.
One of my favorite photos, so I thought you might enjoy that.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful. It's
You're very
beautiful. And the history of this, it was used for various, a nursing home at one time you mentioned?
Yes, it was a nursing home. It was a sanatorium. It was also a state hospital. So there was been a multiple amount of functions that it had over the course of its lifetime, and now it's sitting there vacant, and there is a fence around it, so you cannot get into it. Fortunately, there's no more attempts at graffiti in there. So
Bird's nest on the chimney there?
and as you stated earlier, it's still in use.
Yep, it's still in use.
Technically, so
right.
yes.
Well, thank you. We will cherish this. Thank
very
you so
welcome.
much, Dave. We do
my pleasure.
appreciate it. And in our last couple of minutes, we do have a couple of more questions.
Oh, well, let me see. Mike, let's get back to you for a moment.
Sure.
Most of the folks who watch our show are familiar with our former association with TAPS, the group that does the show Ghost Hunters. And you were on a few of the episodes. Can you just real quick tell us your favorite one? And
Yeah, I was on the first 3 seasons. I don't know, my favorite one? There was a couple of things, but when we filmed the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas, when we were down in the bowels of the ship, and there was really no one on board other than us, we were going through, and I believe it was Donna. Yeah, it was Donna that was with us. And we could hear these voices off in the distance, and couldn't tell what it was. But when we played back the EVP, electronic voice phenomena, you could hear 2 women talking. One said, let me back up a step and state that the ship was hit by a kamikaze pilot, back in its heyday, and of course a lot of people had burned, etc. And so when we're talking, we hear these voices. When I played it back, you hear one lady say, "What's happening?" And another one says, "Rob, get up here." And you hear, while she says, "Rob, get up here," you hear a scream behind her voice. And it was captured during the show, and that was pretty interesting.
wow. Well, I really wish that we could get into more. There's so much more for us to talk
We've
about.
got to have you guys back on. Promise it won't be so long.
Mike has Wednesdays off.
Yes, we've got to have you guys on on again.
And he lives by me, so
Yeah.
we ride together. So.
All right.
Mike, you recently celebrated a milestone birthday with a parachute jump, your first ever, right?
I did, yes.
Now you're a pilot, you're a trained pilot, but this time you were outside of the plane.
Yeah, foolish
We want
me.
you to bring that footage next time, okay?
I can do that. I can do that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, guys. It's been great having you.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.
That was great.
Wonderful.
Very nice to see both of
Yeah,
you.
you heard that.
seeing
They're
you
going to
guys.
come back to us. They're going to come back again.
Wednesdays off.
God bless you and good night, everyone.
Thank you.